Let's unpack what this private prosecution bid against President Cyril Ramaphosa is all about, and whether there was any merit to the former president's arguments.
I think certainly there wasn't much merit to the president's arguments around the leave to appeal, because if you remember what the Gauteng High Court had indicated was that there is no valid nolle prosequi certificate against the president. And because of that, and the fact that the former president did not meet the requirements of Section 7.1 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which is the gateway to a private prosecution, that private prosecution was unlawful. And if you look at the test that was required, specifically the fact that there should have been a nolle prosequi certificate that names the president, this matter wasn't going to go any further, given that factually there wasn't a nolle prosequi certificate that named the president, and Mr. Zuma could not prosecute him on that basis.
Reitumetse, thank you for that context. At this point, what precedents does this set, and will the former president have any other legal options or tactics to explore at this point?
Mr. Zuma may, of course, petition the Supreme Court of Appeal for leave to appeal to that court. The questions that the Supreme Court of Appeal will consider in whether to grant him leave to appeal are much similar to the questions that the Gauteng High Court considered in dismissing his leave to appeal application. So really what we'll be looking at, or the Supreme Court of Appeal will be looking at, is whether there are any prospects of success on appeal, and failing that, whether there's any exceptional circumstances, rather, that would dictate that the Supreme Court of Appeal should hear an appeal. I think on both instances, it's unlikely that the Supreme Court of Appeal will find different from the Gauteng High Court. I think the KZN court yesterday in Pietermaritzburg put a great exposition on why there would not be compelling circumstances that would facilitate an appeal. And certainly from the Gauteng High Court today, it's very clear that there won't be any prospects of success in this particular matter. So I think when you take those two arguments together, you can see the type of argument that will face Mr. Zuma if he does lodge a petition to the SCA to appeal this judgment. And I think both of those arguments can be raised by the president in successfully defending that leave to appeal application, should Mr. Zuma make it.
Well, for the past 2 days, it's been a double blow, especially when the KwaZulu-Natal High Court in Pietermaritzburg on Monday dismissed the former president's attempt to appeal the invalidation of his private prosecution against Advocate Billy Downer and Karen Maughan. And I wonder at this point, what does this all amount to for him?
Well, what it does show is that, when the former president embarked on these private prosecutions, he certainly wasn't doing that for a lawful purpose. I think that has become very clear, that the motive behind these private prosecutions is unlawful. And over and above that, the jurisdictional requirements that had to give effect to them are unlawful. And I think, that becomes very clear that the former president, cannot continue in this particular vein. So I think it does mean to him that essentially more and more of the doors for him from a legal perspective to find legal wriggle room are closing. And I certainly don't believe that the SCA is an option to him or the Constitutional Court, given what we've read and heard from these two courts.
Finally, it seems like the costs are piling up. What's the impact of the costs on the former president? How does one afford all of this? From a legal standpoint, what's being indicated here?
Yeah, the costs are piling up, and it's not just costs or just ordinary cost orders. I mean, if you look at the Pietermaritzburg High Court order yesterday, it was the costs of two counsel, which is really quite a punitive cost order against Mr. Zuma. So I think he will be reeling from that once those bills of costs get taxed and the sheriff or whoever makes demand against him to, make payment in accordance with what the registrar of the High Court would have taxed as the amount payable by Mr. Zuma in respect of those costs. But they're certainly piling up, and those cost orders are not standard in the sense that, two counsel have been included, and which will really become quite hefty for Mr. Zuma.